In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Creality Scan Ferret Pro 3D scanner. We're going to talk about where it fits and how we can make the most out of this 3D scanner, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we're going to be talking about the Creality Scan Ferret Pro. Now, full disclosure, this was sent to me, so consider it a paid promotion, but I will try my best to give you my honest opinion on the scanner, and we'll talk about how we can make the most out of it if this is the scanner of your choice. Now, there are two different versions of the Creality Scan Ferret. There's the Scan Ferret and the Pro, and to the best of my knowledge, the only difference is the Wi-Fi 6 wireless bridge. Now, I did test out the wireless bridge paired to a smartphone. I was not able to get it to work paired to my laptop, and I think in theory, the best use case for this is to pair it to your laptop, because that way you can go about scanning without being tethered to a computer. Obviously, you will have to work within the confines of the battery that comes with it. But for this first example, I scanned a bicycle helmet, and I did this in 3 different scans. I did it scanning tethered to my PC. I did it tethered to my laptop, and then I used the Wi-Fi bridge to my smartphone. So this was a good test of how the scanner was going to work in all 3 scenarios. Now, the first thing I found is that the amount of time that you spend hovering over an object will directly indicate how good the downstream mesh and points are going to be. You need to make sure that everything's a bright green color when you're scanning. I did not really notice a performance difference between the PC and the laptop. I took about 5 minutes to scan in both instances, including the one-click process. With the smartphone, the end result actually is the same. And interestingly enough, I ended up capturing more frames on the phone in the same amount of time. However, the processing time took longer to do on the phone. Again, it was still the one-click process. I didn't toggle or tweak any of the options or settings. I just used whatever it had as a preset, scanned it with color, and I did notice again, it took longer for the optimization and the processing. Now I'm using a Samsung Galaxy S23, I believe, so fairly recent phone. I did notice it got warm during that process. The scan was fine, but processing it did tax the phone a little bit. But again, I think that the benefit here is the wireless bridge. If it can be tethered to either your PC or your laptop, there's not really a good reason I can see to use it tethered to a smartphone, because you can plug directly into the phone. You're not really gaining anything in terms of performance using that option, to the best of my knowledge. Now, what I noticed again is the tracking was fine. Scanning the shiny objects, the black objects, it actually did a really good job, but we can see that there are going to be a definite difference in the scan quality on the shiny white and red areas and the shiny black areas. This does come in full color, so I can export this OBJ and bring it into Fusion 360 with the color, so I thought that was a pretty nice addition. A lot of times as you get up in the scale of 3D scanners, the color options are add-ons. So the fact that these entry-level scanners can offer up the 24-bit full color is a pretty nice feature. When using the scanner, I will say that it's very important that the preview on the screen is that bright green color. When I scanned this with my desktop and I scanned it with the laptop, both of them took about 5 minutes to scan as well as process with the one-click option. I didn't go through any of the settings or the toggles, and I just simply used everything that Creality ships it with. Now, I will say that I think that this software and the scanner are really meant for an entry-level person, and it's designed to sort of pair with their 3D printers. So if you're scanning something that you're planning on 3D printing, I think this is a perfect companion. Now, the quality of the mesh, when we talk about that, it's better on those shiny white areas than it was on the shiny black areas, but overall, I think it did a really good job of scanning the helmet. The next thing that we're going to move into is car parts. Now, this is probably what most of you are interested in on this channel, whether or not we can scan a car with it. First object I did was the pop-up headlight on my car. I used marker tracking, which is a new addition to the CR Scan software. So keep that in mind that it's just been added. The last version, the last release, just added marker tracking. Now, what I will say is that this took a bit longer than I expected. This was tethered to a laptop, so I wasn't using a smartphone. And I found that I had to spend a good bit of time in order to get that bright green color on the preview. The areas in the corners where I don't have the bright green, as we begin to process the points in the mesh, starts to lose out on that data. So I will say that the output had a bunch of bumps where the markers were, and I didn't see any automated option for removing those. You can go through the process manually. Once you mesh it, you can remove those and patch it, but I actually found that the quality of the patch was a bit better filling those holes in Fusion 360, so I simply exported it with all the bumps. When we get to Fusion, I do a little bit of processing by using a remesh and also using the smoothing. And this was able to filter out those points, so I didn't have to worry too much about doing a lot of extra work. The end result, the quality of the surface, and this was done in high quality mode, which there is also a fast scan mode, but the quality of the surface or the mesh that we got is actually pretty good, but the more we process it, the more we're going to start to lose some detail. Which brings me to the next example, which was the front corner of the fender, so right near that same area of the pop-up headlight, and this had a bunch of harder edges on it, and I was really curious as to how this would work. I did this by just using the feature or geometry tracking, no markers, and I did it relatively quickly. I didn't spend a bunch of time making sure that the surfaces were bright green in the preview, and we can see a very drastic difference in the quality of the scan. Now, I think when I see comments about this is not a professional scanner, it's not. It's a consumer entry-level hobby scanner. But there is definitely a difference in quality when you spend more time scanning your objects versus when you just go through it fast. Now, even though I went through this fast, I brought it into Fusion and I did some processing and I was able to get what I think is a usable result. But again, the more you process and smooth, the more details you're going to end up losing. So there is going to be some diminishing returns to how much you can process this. With something that is maybe a little bit smoother and doesn't have those hard edges, you can maybe get away with a little bit more processing. But with the same corner, if I'd spent more time scanning, I would have gotten a better result. So would I scan an entire car with this? I don't think so. I think that if you use the fast scan mode tethered to a laptop, it could be done. But the problem is its cable is fairly short, so you will have to constantly move the laptop around with you. Or if you use a smartphone, then you have a little bit more freedom to move around, but you are going to likely take a hit in the frames per second that you're capturing. So I think that this process to get good data of an entire car would just take way too long. Is it possible? Yeah, sure. I think that you could do it, but would you want to? Probably not. Now, when we move into the next example, one of the things that I see on the Creality Store website is scanning an entire motorcycle. Now, I was skeptical as to whether or not this was possible or feasible, so I tried it on one of my bikes. So this is an old GPZ 750 project bike that I've had for 20 plus years. Now, I went into it. This is a single scan. I spent the most amount of time on the gas tank. The tail section is raw sheet metal. It's something that I was building. And then I quickly went over the engine and some other areas, moving out to see where the tires were and the wheels and the swing arm and all that sort of stuff. Now, I will say that the amount of time that I spent scanning the tank, the results are pretty good. I think that I could use that to design some parts off of. However, the rest of it, because I didn't spend the amount of time to hover over all of those fine details, it just ends up being junk in the scan. So as soon as you start optimizing and trying to build a mesh out of this, you'll start to see that those areas get really rough. That's kind of what you have to expect. The scanner itself can do this, and I think that if you took the time, you would be able to get something usable out of it. But I think that the amount of time it would take to scan an entire motorcycle would just be unrealistic. Not to say that you can't do it again, but I think that it's probably not a realistic ask to be able to do that. I will say that the tracking did work pretty well, and it was really good at picking up the dark black areas and the shiny areas. That was really surprising to me that it did so well with those areas. So I think that if you really wanted to get a high resolution scan of, say, the engine, if it's shiny black, I think you could do it if you were patient enough and you spent enough time in those areas. Moving on to the next example is a small turbo that's also from this GPZ project. Now, I spent probably the most amount of time scanning this out of anything else that I scanned. I spent a lot of time moving the scanner around, trying to ensure that the compressor housing was that bright green color. And this doesn't have any prep on it. There's a little bit of dirt in some of the areas because this actually came off of a diesel Bobcat. But what I found was because those sort of deep areas where that dirt was, they really didn't scan that data very well. And I won't say very well because I didn't spend the amount of time to get those areas green. Now, what I found was as I was scanning it, it just wasn't bringing that data back. I think with some more prep work, potentially some scan spray, it would do a better job. But I think that I could get a usable scan out of this in probably 30 minutes, something that I could position it in 3D relative to the scan of the motorcycle to help me design things like a header. But I'm not going to be using that to actually design the flanges for the head of the motorcycle or the flanges for the turbo. I just don't think that the data was accurate enough for that. Could you spend the time and get that? Probably. But again, realistically, we have to look at how much time we have to spend scanning. So the next thing when we're talking about scanning that I moved on to was I was really curious to see how well it did outdoors. So I took it outside and I scanned the rim on my truck. I was surprised at how well this worked. I only spent probably a minute or 2 minutes doing this. Again, I was still tethered to a laptop. And what I noticed is that it did a great job at bringing out the letters on the tires. And it did a really good job on picking up the shiny silver areas. So the rims are a dark gray powder coat. And then there are areas that are machined and it's all clear coated. So everything's shiny. Some areas are darker than others. And what I found was the amount of time, again, that you spend making sure that everything you're interested in is that bright green is really the key to using this scanner. The areas where I thought it was good enough in the corners or creases between some of the features, once I got it back to the computer to process, I found out that I just didn't have enough data there. So it really pays dividends to spend the amount of time at the start to be able to actually capture all that data. The next thing that I looked at was just a little Halloween decoration. This is about an inch tall, and I just put it on a turntable, which doesn't come with the scanner, and I just let it scan. I just wanted to see what it would do, and I think that this is probably where the scanner is meant to be. Now, I think it does a great job if you are, say, building small objects or sculptures and you want to digitize them and 3D print them. I think that's really where the scanner was designed to be. Can you scan a car with it? Sure. Can you scan a motorcycle with it? Yes. Can you scan small detailed objects with it? Yeah. If we look at the turbo, we could read the castings, we could read the letters on the castings, and we could pull out the detail on the tire of the truck. All that was really impressive. But again, you're going to have to spend a good bit of time capturing that data to ensure that it's good. And you're likely going to spend some time processing the data outside of the Creality Scan software. All right, so now we've taken a look at a couple of examples. We've seen how it works in various instances. I think we need to talk about where this fits in the overall spectrum of 3D scanning. Now, remember that we've got two versions, the CR Scan Ferret and the Pro. And again, I believe the Pro is going to come with the Wi-Fi 6 wireless bridge where the traditional Scan Ferret does not, but I think structurally speaking, both scanners are identical. Now, there are some deals going on right now. There are discounts. You can check the description of this video. I believe that the Scan Ferret is on sale right now for $320 or $330. And the Pro version is on sale for around $380. And typically it's in the $450 range. So if you're looking to pick one of these up, it's a good time to do so because they are on sale right now. And I think that goes until November 10th or so. So keep that in mind that if you're looking to pick one up, that those deals are ending. So check the description of the video for that information. Now, in terms of what I think that the scanner can do or should do, it's really intended for an entry-level person to scan objects that they want to 3D print. Now, it claims that the smallest object is 50 millimeter cube, and it goes up to larger objects, obviously things like cars and fenders and motorcycle parts and things like that. Now, hopefully with the examples you've seen, you understand a little bit about how it works and the quality of the scans that you can get with it. But in terms of what I think that the scanner can do or where it sort of fits into the ecosystem or the spectrum of 3D scanning, I think for objects like the handmade motorcycle tail section, that was bare sheet metal. It did a really great job of scanning that. Obviously, I'm not looking at a perfect replica of a hand beaten sheet metal tail part, but I could use that to digitize it and then begin designing my parts around it. So I think it's a great use case for that. If you're using it with the wireless bridge or with your smartphone, you've got a little bit more mobility to where you can move around and scan objects easily without being tethered to a computer. So again, there's a bonus there. If you're going to be doing hand sculptures, if you're trying to make a custom piece out of clay and you want to get that sort of rough clay model into the computer as a basis for your design, again, I think it's a perfect use case for that. Now, the first example that we looked at with the helmet, I think it actually did a really good job with that as well. Obviously, helmets are tricky because there are a lot of open sections and pockets and things you have to scan into. And because of the different textures and colors, it also puts it through its paces to figure out how well it does scanning things like shiny black areas and into those crevices and corners. But overall, I was pretty impressed with the 3 scans I did of the helmet with the PC, the laptop, and tethered to the smartphone. So, where I think that you should really consider the scanner that you're buying is surrounding the ecosystem that you work within. And what I mean by that is the CR Scan Ferret and the Scan Ferret Pro are really marketed as an entry level, affordable consumer 3D scanner. And I think that it certainly fits in that category. And what you're going to notice as you begin to spend more money on 3D scanners is that the software that's paired with it oftentimes gives you a lot more options. And what I mean by that is options in terms of setting up the scan, but also options in terms of processing the points and processing the mesh. With the Creality software, and in this case we're using Creality Scan, you have a couple of sliders and sort of one-click options to optimize the points and to optimize the mesh. Now, if you need to go past that, then you need to move into another piece of software, something free like MeshLab or move into Fusion 360 like we did in these examples. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a big detractor, but it's something that you should consider. If you are trying to compare the scanner to something in the couple $1,000 range or up from there, $30,000, $50,000 range, you are going to see a drastic difference in the available options that you have on the software side as well as on the hardware side for the scanners. So it's not realistic to try to compare all 3D scanners to each other. You have to look at what you have available, you have to look at the price range, and ultimately what kinds of things you're trying to 3D scan. Now, the big thing that we talk about on this channel is sort of cars or automotive parts, not really out of necessity, it's just kind of what the channel has evolved into. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is the best scanner for the job. If your intent is to scan car bodies and car parts and reverse engineer things or design parts off of that, I don't know that this is the best scanner for you. It's just not really made for that type of work. In reality, if that's the thing that you're looking to do, you really need to get in and spend a good bit of money for a dedicated laser scanner, something that is ideal for that application. And the entry level for those, really you're talking about $15,000 plus to get into a laser scanner or even a higher end structured light scanner. So again, could it be done? Yes. You could spend the time and you could scan your car and you could likely get your usable results out of that with some additional processing. But it's really not made for that. It's not made to scan large objects like that. And it's just going to take a good bit of time. Now, if our turbo took about 15 minutes, you saw the results. The pop-up headlight cover took about 10 minutes. And you could see the results there. That 10 minutes of scanning plus a little bit of processing time. If you think about scanning an entire fender or an entire car for that matter, it's going to take a good bit of time to get anything usable out of that. So just keep that in mind that as you begin to spend more money, you are looking at more application specific scanners. Now, I will say that these entry level scanners like the CR Scan Ferret pack a lot of options into a single unit. For example, the RGB camera. A lot of times as you get higher up into the scanners and you look at more specific scanners, things like a laser scanner for scanning car bodies, you won't have any color or texture options with those because they're really dedicated at high precision, high accuracy, and capturing those shiny objects. The Scan Ferret scanned outside really well. When we did the rim just really quickly over about 30 seconds or a minute, It was really impressive, the ability to scan in bright, direct sunlight. And that's something, again, a lot of other scanners really struggle with because of the way that they're built. And so, as I mentioned at the start of this video, it can consider it a paid promotion. I'm not here to sell you on the scanner. If you want to buy one, there are some links in the description, but they're not affiliate links, so there's no benefit to the channel for you to buy one. I simply want to give you enough information about how the scanner works and a good idea as to what those results look like when you're talking about what the mesh outputs look like. And you can go to the description of the video and download a couple of the samples, the helmet, and the different pieces of the car and the little skull that we looked at. And you can kind of make that decision for yourself. At the end of the day, if you have one of these or have experience with one, good or bad, feel free to leave a comment so other people can get that information as well. If you have had luck or not had luck processing your scans and have questions, please leave those in the comments as well, and I'll do my best to answer those. And if there's anything else, any other general questions or suggestions. At this point, I have done several scanner videos on this channel, and I think that I've got a few more that are going to come. And if there's anything specific that you want to see, I've already got a long list of requests from people on different parts, and hopefully I'm able to sort of check all those off the boxes. But if there's anything that you haven't seen in the comments, please let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.